By 1919, Europe was in ruins, both structurally and culturally. Decades of stability had been smashed to smithereens by the most violent and bloodthirsty war the world had ever known. In this atmosphere, Maurice RAVEL composed one of his most passionate, romantic, and ultimately savage works, his masterpiece, La Valse, or The Waltz. Ravel had long been fascinated by the allure of the waltz, with its wheeling, giddy, one-in-a-bar pulse, its air of intoxication and its glamour. Both his ballet Mother Goose and his set of noble and sentimental waltzes investigated the dance's mysteries, albeit through a more classical, Schubertian lens. But around 1911, he declared his interest in writing a tribute to the king of the Viennese waltz. Ravel remarked, "I wanted to write a grand waltz, a sort of homage to the memory of the great Strauss. Not Richard, the other, Johann. You know how much I love those wonderful rhythms." Johann Strauss's waltzes epitomize the cultural legacy of the mid-19th century. They're almost a symbol of the stability, but also the careless decadence that characterized the years from the 1850s to the outbreak of war in 1914. Despite his comments to the contrary, Ravel's take on the waltz is symptomatic of his own times. Yes, he can look and enjoy the beauty of the dance, but as somebody living in the aftermath of destruction, eventually he can only tear it to pieces. The English composer George Benjamin puts it in this way: "Whether or not it was intended as a metaphor for the prediction of European civilization in the aftermath of the Great War, its one-movement design plots the birth, decay, and destruction of the waltz itself." Ravel described La Valse with the following preface to the score: "Through whirling clouds, waltzing couples may be faintly distinguished. The clouds gradually scatter. One sees an immense hall peopled with a whirling crowd. The scene is gradually illuminated. The light of the chandeliers bursts forth at the fortissimo. We are set in an imperial court, about 1855. The music begins with murky bassoons bobbing up and down over rumblings in tremolo strings. Gradually strains of Imperial Vienna enter the soundscape. We can picture the Second Empire golden ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, men elegant in tailcoats, and women glittering in diamond tiaras and couture. The music blazes forth with swirling swagger and confidence. But almost immediately, we hear murmurs beneath the whirl. What follows is the musical equivalent of a melting waxwork, disintegrating before our eyes as the dance grows wilder and wilder. The waltz is one in a bar, but it's one in a bar consisting of 3 smaller beats, yum bum bum bim bum bum. The fact that it's in 3 is what makes it so enticing to us, since we are symmetrical 2-legged creatures who are usually more comfortable in a march, with its 4 beats mirroring our 2 arms and 2 legs. The waltz is an escape from normality. Its instability intoxicates us with its asymmetrical whirl. As the music grows to an exhilarating climax, Ravel destroys the decadent whirl with the very antithesis of the triple beat of the waltz, a terrifying slam of not 3 but 4 notes. The dream is ended. The waltz is over, just as the steady continuum of European culture had been shattered. Next, we present a world premiere by the American composer Courtney Bryan. Courtney was our first Mary Carr Patton composer-in-residence a few years ago, and we're delighted that she's writing us a second piece entitled Visual Rhythms. The piece takes its title from a painting by the African-American artist Alfred Smith, in which the artist depicts musical rhythms visually. In Courtney's work, she takes this idea full circle, starting out with the visual as an inspiration for music. Courtney's piece is a series of vignettes, each one a musical response to a photograph or artist, all of whom are significant in Black culture. Visual Rhythms begins with a movement entitled Autumn Garden, after a painting by Norman Lewis, a painter who began as a social realist in the middle of the 20th century, but gravitated towards abstraction in his later work. Another movement responds to Romare Bearden's painting Circe, in which the all-powerful goddess from Homer's Odyssey is presented as a black woman in traditional West African clothes. Part of a series Bearden painted in 1977, in which the entire story of the Odyssey is retold with black characters. Courtney's music is bold and forthright, depicting the goddess who was feared for turning men into swine. Other movements respond to photographs. Interestingly, Herman Leonard's portrait of Billie Holiday from 1953. The portrait depicts Billie Holiday mid-song with a cloud of cigarette smoke swirling around the microphone. Courtney captures the atmosphere perfectly with a sensuous alto flute solo and sultry chords in the strings. Ever since I first heard Courtney's music, I've been drawn to the way in which she draws on different aspects of African American musical culture. As a brilliant jazz pianist, the language of that music is never far away, especially when referring to singers like Billie Holiday or saxophonist Sonny Rollins, the subject of another portrait. But similarly, church music and spirituals and the classical tradition are never far away either. It's perhaps this unique expression of melding cultures that has attracted much attention to Courtney's music recently. Last month, she was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship, the so-called Genius Grant that comes with a very large cash prize. She also recently was signed by one of the most prestigious classical music publishers, the London-based house Boosey & Hawkes, who publish everybody from Stravinsky to Britten. I'm delighted the Jacksonville Symphony continues to be a part of Courtney's story. To whet your appetite for this exciting new work just a little more, I'm going to give my final words to the composer herself. I consider myself to be a minister of music, using this medium to share a sense of freedom, unconditional love, and a spirit of healing. My spirituality is the central thread of my body of work. As a composer and performer, I aim to be ever present and honest in my music. My compositions often prioritize stories of Black women figures, respond to historical and contemporary social issues, act as a musical meditation as part of my ever-evolving personal interest in spirituality, and value the importance of place. The culture and spirit of my hometown, New Orleans, remains a major inspiration in my work, as well as various cities where I've lived. My overall ambition is the creation of uninhibited beauty. We end our concert with one of my favorite symphonies, a work that is often unfairly seen as an empty, bombastic crowd pleaser, but which is in fact a technical tour de force capable of instilling a unique sense of spiritual ecstasy. Camille Saint-Saëns' mighty Third Symphony, nicknamed the Organ. Saint-Saëns lived from 1835 to 1921, a period of incredible change in music. It's hard to believe that when he was born, Beethoven was still being mourned. By the time of his death, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring had entered the repertoire, despite Saint-Saëns himself being one of the detractors, yelling insults during its famous riotous premiere in 1913. He composed his Third Symphony towards the end of his life, conducting its premiere at St. James's Hall in London in 1886. The work was commissioned by the Venerable Philharmonic Society, which had commissioned Beethoven's Ninth Symphony 60 years before. Writing with a specific concert hall in mind, Saint-Saëns included an organ, saying, "I gave everything to it I was able to give. What I have accomplished, I will never achieve again." One of the work's many technical innovations is that it is cast in 2 movements rather than the usual 4, unheard of at the time. Beginning in a kind of Wagnerian no man's land, The first movement opens with a nervous theme that one critic has brilliantly described as coming from the loins of Schubert's Unfinished. This slides uninterrupted into a beautiful slow movement, ethereal and spiritual, in the distant key of D-flat major. The organ subtly supports the orchestra, adding depth and translucent color to the soaring string melodies, unique in Saint-Saëns' oeuvre for their impassioned depth and beauty. The second movement proper is a riveting scherzo, closely related to the nervous first movement. Here, Saint-Saëns uses one of the most advanced compositional techniques in French music of the day: thematic transformation. The scherzo seems to morph out of the first movement, a trick learnt from Berlioz and Liszt, but here not used for programmatic storytelling ends, but as the underpinning for absolute symphonic music, about nothing more than the notes. As the scherzo comes to an end, the symphony's coup de théâtre takes our breath away, a massive, unadorned chord of C major on the organ. Not since Haydn wrote the same chord to depict God's unveiling of the universe in the creation has C major sounded so awe-inspiring. Then comes the big tune that will motivate the rest of the movement. Beautiful, delicate, humble, and breathtaking. Many of you will know it from Disney's movie Babe. Saint-Saëns adds a piano to the orchestra, played simultaneously by 4 hands, giving a glorious raindrop-like sheen to the melody. The coda is a massive, thrilling fugue, Saint-Saëns showing off his compositional prowess as he masters one of music's most difficult technical techniques. The critic of the English newspaper The Guardian, Tom Service, has pointed out one of the finale's most exciting features. Saint-Saëns manages to do something in the symphony that it would take Sibelius to top. He warps time and space. The theme of themes is sped up so much that time seems to slow down. Capped by the organ's thunderous bass line, playing notes that the human ear can only just hear, but which you should feel in the whole as more like primordial vibrations. The effect is both a masterstroke of time-melting symphonism as an irresistibly joyous coda to the technical glories of the piece. One of classical music's great joys, sending our spirits soaring in a feeling of giddy excitement and spiritual ecstasy. Some critics have sensed an underlying program in the symphony, a depiction of the resurrection. Certainly, the work's journey from what could be described as human nervousness to divine confidence could be seen in this light. But the symphony can also be enjoyed in purely musical terms, brimming with joy and optimism. What a fitting conclusion to Saint-Saëns' long and industrious musical career. We can't wait to share this program with you on March 8th and 9th. Join us in Jacobi Symphony Hall for concerts you won't forget.